A pleasant day, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Teacher Tinitin's Classroom. This is Mrs. Christine Q2M5, your grade 9 English teacher. We have two most essential learning competencies for the fifth module, and these are to analyze literature as a means of understanding and changing values in a VUCA world or volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and to make connections between text to particular issues, social issues, concerns, or dispositions in real life. So, to be able to achieve it, the following objectives would help. First, identify the voice of the verb used in a sentence. Use the active and the passive voices of the verb in expressing social issues, concerns, and dispositions in life. And transform sentences from active voice into passive voice and vice versa. So, what is the voice or what is voice of the verb? So, voice is the form a verb takes to indicate whether its subject acts or is acted upon. So, when the subject of the verb does something, that is, acts, the verb is in it, the active voice. But when the subject of the verb receives that action, or we call as the object, that is acted upon, the verb is in its passive voice. So, to be able to understand it, let's have these examples. So, in the active voice, we say, Buffalo Bill killed over 4,000 buffalo in 1 year. Here we are emphasizing the actor, who is Buffalo Bill. Okay. And in the passive voice, over 4,000 buffalo were killed in 1 year by Buffalo Bill. We are emphasizing the number of buffaloes that was killed by Buffalo Bill. So most of the time, we use the active voice. And there are times that we need to use the passive, so voice. So when do we use the passive voice? So the first is when the doer is unknown or unimportant. The passive voice enables you to emphasize what happened when the person or thing acting is unknown or unimportant. Let's take a look at these two examples. DDT was found in local soil samples. In this sentence, we are emphasizing DDT or the chemical DDT and not the person who found it. Okay? Then we also have the second example. We were required to embroider, and I had a trunk full of colorful dish towels, pillowcases, runners, and handkerchiefs to my credit. So here it's a passive voice that emphasizes what they had to do and not who required them to do it. Another thing to use the passive voice is when the recipient of the action should logically receive the emphasis. So the passive voice, okay, enables you to emphasize the logical uh, the logical object of the action, which becomes the subject of the sentence. Example, malted milk was patented in 1881 by James and William Horlick as a food supplement for infants. So we are not emphasizing who patented malted milk, but we are emphasizing that malted milk was patented, or malted, or the word malted milk. Next is King Tut's tomb, which was filled with gold and jewels, was discovered in 1922 by E.S.M. Herbert. So we're not emphasizing here who discovered King Tut's tomb or Mr. Herbert, but we are emphasizing that King Tut's tomb was filled with gold and jewels. Grits, a dish made of ground corn, is eaten by people throughout the southern United States. This is a passive voice that we are emphasizing the dish grits and not those who eat it. Now, how do we change active voice to passive voice? The active voice actually begins with the subject, with the subject, while passive voice begins with the object of the sentence. So we have different ways. So the tense of the verbs changes also. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. In the simple present tense, the active voice "an" does the project. The passive becomes the project is done by "an." Now, why is it so? Let's take note that the subject is "an," the verb is "the," or the present verb "does," okay, or the verb "does," and then the object is the project. So our objective is to make the project the subject and "an" as the object. So in this case, we say the project is done by "an." Take note that the word "does" changes its form to verb to be, which is, and the past participle of the word "does." Okay. Another is changing active voice to passive voice in its present continuous form. Here, our subject is "an" again. Our verb is a linking verb followed by the present participle, of course, is doing because it's a continuous form. And the object is her project. Again, we change it. The project, which is the object, becomes the subject, is being done. Okay. Which now the passive form of is doing. So we change is doing changes to is plus, of course, the verb be and the past participle of doing by "an," which is the subject. However, in some cases, we can also drop the word or the words by "done." Okay. Now we also have simple past. How do we change passive form, active form in its passive simple past? Example: I submitted the project. In the passive, we say the project was submitted by "an." Take note, take note that submitted changes into was submitted. That okay. So submitted is also the past participle of submitted. And was is our linking verb. Okay. Next, changing past continuous active to active. Active rather to passive. Okay. Anne was making her project. Okay. Here, was making was transformed into was being made. So again, we have the linking verb was. Why was? Because we are in our past tense. Being, okay, we have the verb be because it's a continuous form. And made, which is the past participle of the word making. We also change active to passive in terms of past perfect tenses. Example, Anne had finished her project. The project had been finished by Anne. Take note that since it's a perfect form, we have to use the word had plus its past participle. Now, in this case, we also change the verb, but we add the verb be, which is been. Okay? You understand? Now, in the simple future, Anne will make her project. In the passive, we say the project will be made by Anne. Again, we have will, okay, which is our indicator that it is in the future tense, made, which is the past participle of the word make, and be, which is our verb be or our linking or our verb be. Okay. Next is, of course, the future continuous. Anne will be finishing her project this afternoon. Now, take note, because we are in the future continuous, take note the word finishing is in its past participle. Again, all of these sentences, the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. Now, what would you notice? All of this has used the past participle of the verb in its active form. Okay? And of course, when you're talking about continuous, you should add being. Okay? And in the perfect tense, we use been. And of course, in simple future, we use be. Okay? Now, let's take note of some of the following reminders in using active and passive voice. So the following tenses cannot be changed into passive voice. Of course, the present perfect continuous tense, you don't change it. So if the sentence is using perfect continuous voice, you just change the subject into an object of the sentence. Past perfect continuous tense, future perfect continuous tense. Okay, so subject pronouns should also be changed to object pronouns when changing active to passive voice. Example, so I becomes me, we becomes us, you becomes you, he becomes him, she becomes her, it, and they, them. Okay? And the word by in passive voice can be replaced by words like with, to, etc. Now, for our list of readings, okay, for example, the pail is filled with sand. So instead of the pail is filled by sand, you say with, okay, because we are talking of an inanimate object here. Okay, so you use with, okay? So, for references, okay, we have Edudos, Hunter Cuny, okay, and that ends our discussion for our lesson on active and passive voice. I hope you learned a lot and use these videos to go over and over to understand what active and passive voice is all about. Goodbye and God bless you all. Thank you for watching.